Americans were allowed to go to China. And so I studied at the Hong Kong Acupuncture College under Dr. James Tin Yao So. And Dr. So has run the school, ran the school from 1939 in Hong Kong. So I was privileged to attend in the early 70s. I met an old Chinese man in 1969 at UCLA when I was a graduate student, and he taught me acupuncture and then took me to Hong Kong to do some. We helped the licensing in California, in Oregon, Nevada, various states. So I've had experience in both East and Western medicine. As I say, I went to medical school and did a residency in family medicine at Kaiser in Riverside, California. I'm also board certified in urgent care medicine. So this is an attempt to meld East-West, which we're all involved in Western technology. Now, today I wanted to talk about immune modulation and the treatment of chronic disease from an East-West. Now, the immune system is our basic shield against outside invading organisms and invading energy fields. And we'll try and talk about both things as we move along, and then we'll talk about some of the treatment modalities that involved in the treatment of the immune system. Let's get started then. The basics of the immune system. The immune system is a set of organs, cells, molecules, and energy fields devoted and involved in conferring to the body the ability to defend itself, as I mentioned, against any foreign organisms, antigenic molecules, and pathogenic forces. Now, the immune functions in order to mount an adequate defense against foreign substances and energy fields. One, the body needs to be able to recognize the difference between self and non-self. And this is a basic problem that we'll talk about later on, because in autoimmune diseases, it loses the ability to discriminate between self and non-self. Two, it has to determine the proper action needed to remove the invading organisms, the compound, or the invading energy. Three, it must limit damage to the body. Here's the body's defense mechanism. And as we just said, it involves self, it has to determine action, target and neutralize, and protect and heal. These are the three aspects of defense mechanism in the immune system. Now, immunity is the effectiveness of the body to recognize, again, these foreign materials, bacteria, virus, toxins, and energy, and to mount an adequate protective response. This adequate protective response is referred to as immune response or simply immunity. And this is an example of bacteria, viruses, toxins, and energy going through the shield or against the shield, and the body's ability to recognize this and mount a protective response is called the immune response or immunity. Now, there are types of immune response. The immune response is affected by several mechanisms that can be grouped into two very basic categories. One is innate immunity, and the other is specific immunity. This is, again, as an example of these two different things, which is immediate general defense And the other is specific immunity, which is targeted or adaptive response, adaptive to the environment. Now, innate immunity is often referred to as native or natural immunity, and it's composed of physical and chemical barriers of cellular structures and functions. White blood cells, such as neutrophils and macrophages, normal blood proteins that make up the complement system, and inflammatory mediators. All of this is original or source qi, yan qi, in Chinese medicine. This is the innate immunity. And you see there are soluble factors, complement proteins. There are phagocytes. There are active phase proteins and interferon. Additional there are cells. These are all parts of what we call the innate immune system. Now, again, the elements are soluble factors, lysosomes, complement, Q phase proteins, C-reactive protein, and interferon. And cells, which are phagocytes and natural killer cells, all of these again constitute the innate immune system. It acts as the first line of defense. It's not improved for by repeated infection. It's bound to repeated infection. And it's part of the inherited body defenses that protect the fetus and the newborn before it becomes has an ability to specifically create immune defense. Innate immune response is not as effective under conditions of spore invaders. Resistance is not improved by repeated infection. It acts as the body's first line of defense. It's part of the inherited body defenses. And again, this is a representation of lysosomes, complement proteins, acute phase proteins, and some of the cells, the phagocytes and natural killer cells. Secondarily, there's the specific immune response. Now, this is called adaptive immunity. It involves mounting a recognition system that involves a specific memory and an effective defense system. It's comprised of lymphocytes and mediator molecules. This is nutrient qi. This is the yin qi. Also, the defensive qi, the wei qi, both form from essential substances in the food, and thus they are a specific immune response adapted as the organism, as the child grows and becomes an adult. It gathers specific immune response factors. Now, features of the specific, well, let me go back for a moment. So this is adaptive immunity. It involves recognition and memory. That involves B cells. It involves T cells and immunological memory. They mount a coordinated attack using T cells and B cells, plasma B cells as well. And this is a coordinated attack, coordinated by defensive or Wei Qi, recognition and memory from nutrient. These support adaptive. And the specifics of this system is enhancement of the innate immune response, production of antibodies from B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes that specialize effectiveness of the immune response. The immunological memory involving mounting of the more effective response the next time the body is invaded. So the first time a body is invaded by a foreign organism, it develops a memory. The next time it sees that foreign invader, it's very quick to respond. This, of course, is the nature of immunization. And it was developed originally for smallpox. It was developed out of the cowpox research by Pasteur and his group in France. And they realized that by giving a very low dose of something related to smallpox, like cowpox, that it prevented the body from getting the disease. A very low dose of a substance triggers the specific immune response and triggers a memory in order to ward off, to fight defense mechanism against future attacks. Again, this is the nature of immunization and the immunizations we give to children and adults. The elements, specific immune system, as we mentioned, soluble humoral effects antibodies released from the B lymphocytes and the cells, the T lymphocytes. Now, we're surrounded by energy in our system. And this energy interpenetrates all living tissue and is polarized when we look at it from a magnetic point of view or an electrical point of view. We can measure certain electrical activity in this. It creates in various pathways. I use the analogy of spreading filings of paper and putting a magnet underneath it, and you see the lines of magnetic force that form around the magnet. In the same way, we have these lines of magnetic force by biological organisms. All living tissue has this active force flowing through it, calling it a biofield, biological field, similar to a magnetic field, similar to from and for biological organisms. This includes all things, plants, animals, humans, all of us interpenetrated with this electrical type force biomass, so field force that interpenetrates everything. Now, the Chinese understood this thousands of years ago, and they mapped the pathways in the body, and those mapped pathways are called meridians. Meridians are the lines of qi, the force field, this biofield that surrounds and interpenetrates us. Now, it extends out from the physical body a certain distance. And we have done some research looking at some of these things. And of course, the brain waves are part of that biofield, that electromagnetic type field. I use electromagnet as an analogy. It isn't exactly right because this is more of a biological organism. It's a three-part energy as opposed to a bipart. Electricity and magnetism are plus minus, North Pole, South Pole. This is three parts. This is like the yin-yang symbol. It's the wave in between the yin, the yang, and the neutralizing where they join together. Those three parts make up the body's biofield system. And we're able to measure certain brain waves, and we're able to look at different frequencies. And we're looking at that as well. One of the things we've done in that area is to incorporate something called Kirlian photography. Kirlian photography is a high frequency field photography. It was developed in the 1950s by Kirlian, husband and wife team uh, in Russia that developed this high frequency field photography that allows us to photograph actually the field around the body or other living organisms. Now, you'll notice that on the left, we have a field um, photograph, and we removed part of the one of the leaves of the plant. This is a leaf, and we removed part of it. You can see it's cut on the right. And on the left, we've taken another picture of it. And interestingly enough, field phenomenon. In other words, the energy that's surrounding the leaf and the part of the leaf that is now missing physically is still represented in a biofield or a field around the leaf itself. So it turns out that the biofield exists even after the physical substrate is gone for a period of time. And that's part of our research, how long the time might last. Anyway, these are some of our studies at UCLA. They were in conjunction with Dr. Thelma Moss, John Hubacher, and myself were the technicians that actually did the study and designed the studies. Additionally, we did measurements of Kirlian photography at the fingers and toes, the ends of the meridians, and we were able to find that there's a projection of this energy field, this body field, this chi, beyond the physical structure. So coming out from the fingertips and from the toes, again, beginning and ends of the meridians, we're able to show that there is actually a field that's projected from these ends of the meridians. Now, in stimulating one point along the meridian, for instance, we'd use up near the nose, a point at the end of the large intestine, and we'd use the measurement on the index finger on the opposite side. We're able to show that by stimulating one area, we get a selective discharge from the index finger. Recorded in their fingers, only in the large intestine extension from the area that we recorded. So again, we're interested in pursuing this idea of being able to quantify, measure, actually photograph some of this biofield that again surrounds all of us and we know as chi in the meridians. The problem that we've had is trying to quantify it, and this is an attempt to try and research and develop techniques for quantifying, measuring, and activating some of this energy. Now, continuing along that line, we have instituting a project with the Veterans Administration in Los Angeles to look at various amputees that have had their limbs amputated through one trauma or another. And many of them still feel the missing limb. Some of them have pain in limb, and it's called phantom limb pain. And this phantom limb pain is very interesting to us. It's unfortunate for the people who have it, of course, but from a scientific point of view, we're interested in seeing if we can help this problem by using some in that phantom limb. If we can see that the energy still exists even when the limb is gone, and we see in then we can possibly stimulate what I'm calling the phantom meridian that exist in that missing limb. Can those phantom meridians be stimulated in order to help some of the phantom limb pain that is afflicting some of the amputees? And this is a project we're just getting going. We're rounding up different steps, and we're trying to see whether we can get this project going. But this is the long research that we've on. We've had a number of preliminary discussions. We'll outline the preliminary product, and we're trying to see if we can follow up with some of this research. But this is ongoing right now. Continuing on, I just a quick slide looking at the opiate type endorphin, dopamine, and other receptors in the brain. Okay. Now, I want to talk more specifically about the roots of immune dysfunction. The immune system, as we talked about, is the major defense mechanism for the body and is often seen to be the root of most chronic diseases. When we are not able to defend ourselves against invading organisms, invading viruses, invading energy fields, then we suffer a chronic disease. Now, what we've done is we're utilizing the five element system as it relates to immune diseases because the emotional constructs of the individual patient is related to the immune dysfunction. Thus, we can identify certain immune dysfunctions and treat them by looking at the by looking at the emotional construct that surrounds that particular immune dysfunction. And so we're looking at the five elements as a way of categorizing different emotional constructs that are indicative, related to, and maybe even causal for some of the chronic diseases that we're faced with every day in our practices. So let's look at some of these emotional constructs and look at ways that they can be manipulated. Metal, for instance, has to do with sadness, tearful, empty, hopeless. When you see a patient that is sad, tearful, feels empty, feels hopeless, it's a metal problem relating again to this immune dysfunction that we've talked about. They're a particular type of immune dysfunction. So that's why we're interested in looking at these emotional constructs. Wood, on the other hand, is angry, irritable, frustrated. Fire involves love interest, sleep disturbances. Earth, change of appetite, tiredness, stagnation. And water is characterized by fear of all different people, fear of situations, fear of types of problems. And here we have, just a representation of metal, wood, fire, earth, familiar to all of us studying the five elements. Okay. Metal, grief and sadness, autumn and decline, yang becoming yin, sinking deeper into the body. And the spirit element is Po, the Po of spirit. It's prenatal depression related to Jing Qi. In other words, the depression starts very, very early in the development of the fetus. Again, it exhibits itself as metal emotional construct, but then causes problems in the innate immune system. The points to use, think about these points for it. Lung 3, window of heaven, which tends to balance Hun and Po. Hun is, of course, we'll talk about it, liver in a minute. And lung 9, which is the earth point, the toe 5. These are points that can be effective for treating this type of emotional construct related, again, to this type of immune dysfunction. And here's just a representation of what we were talking about. It should have lung 3 in here instead of lung 9 repeated. Okay. Okay. Okay, water. Water is if fear, winter, deepest depression, a loss of connection of who we are. Points that treat the Shen are used. It's often a water imbalance. The points are heart 7 and kidney 3. Also consider kidney 23 and 24. Protects the Shen and treats, supposedly, according to the ancient texts, treats buried fears from childhood. Again, affecting that innate immune system. Winter, fear, treating the Shen, protects the Shen and buried childhood fears. And wood. Wood is the spring. It bursts of anger and mood swings, plans not fulfilled. It's a strong movement of yang qi stagnation, not seeing resolution or hope. Again, when your patients show these characteristics, this is the type of immune dysfunction that should be corrected. Again, to bring back the innate immune system into being able to deal with some of these problems. And the points, liver 2 and 3, the 2 is a sedation point, 3 is a stimulation. Consider also liver 14, the end of the meridian, which has to do with transforming in general one aspect to another. And here's some of the representation of the wood spring and new growth, resolution and hope, and some of the points to treat. Fire. Fire is related to joy and elation, restless, difficulty sleeping, loneliness. I'm talking about excessive joy and excessive elation, restlessness, difficulty, loneliness. Now, this is a classic Shen disturbance, right? The Shen comes out of the Jing Qi. The Jing Qi produces the Shen. And this disturbance is a critical type of problem in affecting the immune system. Points that we like to treat this as heart 4 and heart 7, both spirit points. Again, both Shen type points. Heart 4 is spirit path, and heart 7 is the gate of spirit. I'm sure these are familiar points, but again, specifically related to this innate immune system. Representation of Shen disturbance, restless sleeping, loneliness, joy, and elation, Shen disturbance. It should say heart 4 and heart 7. It's replicated it. Now, this is late summer, damp, phlegm problems, digestive problems, overthinking, preoccupied, obsessive thoughts. And the digestive problems are a specific area for this and often is indicative of immunity problems where there are major digestive issues. And again, it's useful to look at these emotional constructs and how they're related to the, the innate immune system. The points we use are spleen 3, which is earth on earth, spleen 4, which is a Chong Mo point, one of the extra. And consider stomach 12, which is at the level of the navel, and which is the meeting point of small intestine and large intestine. So those two come together energetically at this particular point, stomach 12. So consider these points. Now, you notice that I only give a few points for each of these. The idea is to try and use as few points as possible to stimulate on a larger scale. The fewer points you use, the more effect you get on the direction you're trying to move the chi. So again, this is an attempt to try and use only a small number of points to get a maximum effect in correcting some of these imbalances. And again, a representation of late summer, harvest, overthinking, worry, obsession, damn phlegm, digestive problems, which of course is very common. You see a lot of our patients. I'm sure you see a lot of your patients. I see a lot of my patients as well with these digestive damp, heat, phlegm problems that stomach, spleen, earth. Now, we've looked at a number of energetic factors relating through emotional constructs and how they affect the immune system that acts to protect us from our environment. So we've talked about the physical and physiological aspects, and we've tried to talk about some of the energetic and emotional aspects. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of what this represents in bringing East and West together. Because that's, of course, what's most interesting, I think, to all of us, is how we can bring this Eastern wisdom and techniques again into and interpenetrate with the Western medicine. So it's that interpenetration, synthesis, that integration that we're looking at. And one of the things that we've tried to do at UCLA in some of our studies is put together some principles of this East-West medicine, rather than just vaguely talking about the integration of medicine. We've tried to lay out some principles of it, some areas that it could be focused on. These aren't the only principles, but they're a start that we feel in trying to quantify and actually know what we're talking about and focus on this integration of East-West medicine. So I'm calling this the synthesis of East and West, quote, the New World medicine. Again, trying to bring together some of these ideas. The first principle, which I'm sorry this slide is cut off, how to fix it, but this has to do with energetic forces interpenetrating physical tissue. And so all of the biological organisms are interpenetrated with energetic features. And one is melded or pushed, if you will, or interpenetrates is a better word probably, the physical tissue. So we exist as the interaction of physical cells, tissues, organisms, embedded with energetic flows. And they act to organize, control, and literally animate the physical body. Now, I quote here, or I just reference here Wilhelm Reich for a moment. Wilhelm Reich was a psychiatrist and researcher in the 1930s, 1940s, even into the early 1950s in America. And he also was a researcher, and he developed what he called the theory of orgone. Now, orgone he saw as this field that surrounds us, and we absorb some of it from the outside. And he put together an orgone box, which consisted of organic material layered with metal organic metal, organic metal, organic metal, in much the same way that the early electricity was two dissimilar metals put together, generating charge. And of course, Volta, the researcher on electricity, caused frogs' legs to jump, putting two dissimilar metals together. Well, these dissimilar metals generate an electrical field. Now we're talking more about a biological field. This biofield is attracted or absorbed by this dissimilar organic metal has an organic component to it. It relates to organic tissue. I use the analogy of the red blood cell. The cell is composed of an iron core metal surrounded by a protein coat of hemoglobin, and they interact together to attract atmospheric or atmospheric energy into the biofield. So it's one of the ways that the body as an organism attracts energy from the outside and delivers it to all the tissues. Again, it's where we get chi from, in one way through the red blood cell acting orgone box, absorbing energy from the outside and circulating it through the body along with its ability to get oxygen, of course. So oxygen and this orgone, this biofield, this chi carried by the red blood cell. Now, one cannot exist without the other. In other words, energy can't exist in a biological form without biology, the physical structure, and the physical structure can't be an organism without the energy. So both are necessary to produce the phenomena that we call life, that we have as a biological existing organism. Now, the energy to organize and the tissue provides structure and stable strength. So the energy is able to create the physical body. The energy flows to create growth and repair, to literally flesh out the organism. So this energy flows and attracts and coordinates physical tissues. So the molecules, the chemical substrate, the physical substrate are all coordinated by this flow of energy. And that's one of the things it does from the very moment of conception. At conception, an energy field is put out, and that attracts various parts, chemicals, tissues, in order to flesh out, to make the fetus itself. But it has to be organized by something, and that's what this energy flow does, is it organizes the tissue. I use the analogy for some of my students that its liver cells don't grow on your elbow. They grow in the liver, and the elbow has its own cells. So it's all coordinated and organized by this flow of energy. The vibrations, the physiological functioning is organized by the vibratory rate of the energetic flows. Again, just some of the principles synthesizing this new world medicine. Now, energy flows first, and the tissue is organized from elemental particles behind it. So the energy, as I mentioned, at the moment of conception starts to flow, and the tissue that literally fleshes out the fetus that then becomes the newborn is organized from elemental particles behind it. And the energy interpenetrates the physical tissue and in turn causes the generation of more dense energy. So it goes from fine to dense, from chi to ATP. ATP being the energy currency of the body that's generated in the mitochondria of each cell, mitochondria being the energy factories for each cell. Now, energy moves from finer to denser. Now, since again, another principle, these are keys again, principles. Prevention is most important in treating any disease state. The cause of any disease begins first on the energetic level, then progresses to physical, again, finer to denser. The cause of almost any illness is from an energetic imbalance or energetic problem first before it becomes manifest in the physical body. Now, that doesn't include trauma or other things that happen along the way, but the disease begins energetically first. Even you might say infectious materials, if the body's innate and specific immune system are not strong enough, then the energetic level allows the invasion of foreign organisms, bacteria, such. Just continuing on, Western, both the energetic as well as physical must be considered in the treatment of disease. So both Western and Eastern must be considered. Western medicine um, is was developed in the to patch up soldiers and get them back to the front lines. And it must be supported. In other words, acutely, you have to stop the bleeding, deal with acute infection, ischemia, MIs, myocardial infarctions, and that must be supported initially. And I use the analogy, I tell myself if I'm in an automobile accident and I'm bleeding profusely, get me to the hospital. In other words, we've got to stop the bleeding, we've got to deal with the acute problem first. What we're looking at, energetic conditions are most important and degenerative type disease, or physical useful for trauma types of acute. So energetic considerations, again, are most important, dealing with chronic. And I might add to that, preventative medicine is going to involve energetic considerations. Now, the body is always in a state of dynamic, not static, equilibrium in relationship to its environment. Again, one of the principles of this East integrative medicine. Now, medicines range from pure energy medicine, like homeopathics, like acupuncture, to natural supplements, replenish the body's processes, to crude drugs, basically pharmaceuticals, or manufactured drugs in addition. These are different levels of energy medicine, or medicines, I should say, going from pure energy to the most dense, which are pharmaceutical. Medicines work on different levels, we noticed. It's denser and must be considered as to the effect at each level. So treatments from the finer acupuncture, stimulate the body's own energy, adding treatments, manipulation, the surgery as most dense, each aimed at affecting different levels of the body. Just as an example, the acupuncture stimulates finer energy, electric stimulation can add to this, manipulation, surgery as the most dense. Each of the energy flows has specific vibrations which have an affinity for each type of cellular tissue. So again, this is a way of coordinating the tissues, coordinating their functions. The energy has specific vibrations, each with a resonance for a particular type of cellular tissue. Now, the body is continually adapting to its environmental conditions at every moment. And the state of optimal health is to make the best adaptation possible. So when we're dealing with our patients, we're looking at helping them to adapt to their environment, not only their uh, physical environment, but their energetic environment, their emotional environment. All of these are particular factors that have to do with the optimal health of the individual at every moment. And there's always interactions going on, and the physician is the highest possibilities are to make he understands the environmental conditions on every different level for the patient. Certainly a difficult task that we all aspire to. Now, 19th and 20th century medicine was naming, categorizing, and curing of diseases, while the 21st century medicine will be concerned with health optimization. And we see this currently in the movement for anti-aging movement that many people are very concerned with and have become involved in, and we're looking at from all types of view. And this is really health optimization, to live as possible, to live as long as possible. The anti-aging movement will continue to grow and be involved again with a combination of East-West medicine, combining energetic and physical medicine. So that is best and strongest possible adaptation of the organism to its environmental influences and stressors, as we mentioned before. Now, a role of wellness clinics, as I mentioned, anti-aging and wellness clinics in the healthcare delivery system, preventative medicine as opposed to reactive medicine. The types of things we're going to be looking at moving forward and utilizing some of the principles that we've outlined in this East-West synthesis that we're all interested in. Disease prevention is the highest aspiration of the physician. And I like to use this quote, my favorite proverbs from Chinese medicine. The inferior physician treats the disease he was not prudent enough to prevent. And again, certainly the highest aspiration for all of us to live up to that principle. The inferior physician treats the disease was not proficient and certainly an aspiration for all of us. This is a book that I put together and by Balboa Press, and it's available on Amazon if people are interested. The Birth of Acupuncture in America, The White Crane's Gift. Again, it's the idea that the treasures of Chinese medicine have been transported to the West and how it evolved in this country. It's an adventure story. It's not meant to be a definitive documentary, but it's an adventure of how we took and were given and trusted with Chinese medicine from our teachers who trained in various monasteries in China and were tasked with coming to America and the gifts of Chinese medicine to America. That's why the white crane, the symbol of the doctor in China, the white crane's gift, and the birth of acupuncture in America. Again, it's Balboa Press, available at Amazon. Now, the next West, this is, I say, been a long-term project, but we have the licensing. We're licensed in most states now. We're doing pretty well. But the next step is to really bring it more into public consciousness. Thus, a movie coming out on this book. We've developed the script. We have a producer. We have some funding. We're looking for more funding. It's always an issue, of course. And it is one of the things that we're trying to develop now is full-length feature motion picture, looking at, again, how this evolved in the United States. And again, it's more of a what I call an adventure story rather than a documentary. So it's not a story. And I think people that are interested in acupuncture or want to be interested in acupuncture will find it quite enjoyable. Anyway, thank you very much for this moment, these few moments to talk about the nature of acupuncture, what it's about, how it affects the immune system, how the immune system is affected by emotional constructs, how those things can be treated with acupuncture, and then a few minutes to put together some synthesis of this integrative medicine system that we're interested in, rather than, again, just talking about it vaguely or just referring to it by a name, integrated medicine. I'm trying to put some constructs with it, some synthesis of it, some principles behind it that can guide our research and guide our directions of clinical practice as well as research practice. Those are areas that we're all involved in and that we're all going to further as we move. Again, I'm Dr. Stephen Rosenblatt. Thank you for your time and attention.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.